Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. The first hour is general discussion, things that we just want to talk about related to media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something that we're a little bit more interested in. We think that this is worth us talking about over time. Today, we're going to have a lot of cool people from Hovercast, the CEO, CTO, product manager for Hovercast, are going to be joining us and answering your questions about their event platform. Tomorrow, of course, is the education hour. We don't broadcast that. That's at 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And then at 11, we're cooking savory pancakes with Davinci Resolve. I'm pretty excited about that. I already got all my stuff. I'm ready to go. So we'll be doing that at 11. And then, and again, the real opportunity there is not just that we're cooking really good food, but we're really playing around with collaborative learning. So it's definitely worth just watching and checking out. And you should bring a camera and try it out. At noon, we have Belfast Method, and the Belfast Method will be going to Todd Reynolds' house. And we were playing with new cameras that Todd's playing with there. So it should be a lot of fun. They're about to experiment with a lot of cool stuff. Reminder that our last Isadora Lab of the week, not the last one, but of the week, will be today at 2. And that is, we've been having a lot of fun. 2 days ago, we built a AV sync system that might actually work. We think that that's going to be pretty interesting. And then we had, as I showed, if you were watching a little before the show, I figured out how to have a lightning sound activate the lights over DMX. And so we're getting our head around Isadora. I think it's pretty powerful. So definitely check it out if you can. Let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
Our first one this morning comes from dear show friend Vienna in Australia. She says, what sort of team building games have the panelists seen to work successfully inside Zoom meetings led by a facilitator?
Go ahead, John.
My bird's very excited if you hear him in the background. This is a really interesting. These guys were traditional in on-premise. They do a song writing and competing product, and they pivoted to Zoom last year called Song Division, and this particular product they had is called Song Slam. It's a really good team building exercise. It's entertaining as well.
I think the only one that I use is Q&A. So that's the only game I play. All right, next question.
Ray Harwood's coming to us from Avondale, Arizona, and Ray says, what app or tools do you use to create a run of show?
Go ahead, John.
Google Docs. We used it this week. We have changes during the show. We've had changes in the schedule, in the rundown schedule, and additional PowerPoints that were given to us in the middle of the show. And having access, everybody have access to that spreadsheet works out very, very well. Google Docs. Yeah,
the only other one that we've used, the two other ones that we've actually used other than Google Docs, and I have to admit that most of the time we use Google Docs for most of our run of shows for the exact reason that John said, is that we can, now I create them, I have to admit that I create them in numbers because Google Docs is so painful to actually create things with. But once it's all created, I adjust everything in Google Docs. We export it out as an XLS and then bring it in because numbers is about 10 times faster to generate something. The other two, though, are ShowFlow and Rundown Creator. Rundown Creator is pretty cool because Rundown Creator will push out teleprompt text based on where you are in the show. It'll also it'll do all the calculations on the show. So you know where you are, how much time is left in the segment, how much time is left in the show. As you add new things and give it to it, it does that automatic calculation. ShowFlow can also do a lot of things where you can, with both of those, you can break it out so people have only the information they need, which makes it a lot simpler and sometimes more secure. Go ahead, Chris.
The real key to operating your show off of a dock is not so much what dock you use or what system or whatever, but it's, Alex, you talk a lot about the wetware issues. What you really need to do is you need to have sort of almost like a spirit of an understanding among all the crew that there is a single point of truth. And that single point of truth is that document. And everybody should be referring to it if changes get made, if timing gets changed, whatever. Everybody has to turn to that single point of truth.
Yeah, and that's really the challenge, is that you have to commit to it. Like whatever you're going to do, you have to commit to that thing.
100%. Yeah.
Because when people, and there's two pieces of that. One is getting the crew to commit to it, The second is you building the interface so that they will commit to it. So that a lot of people say, well, they just won't commit to it. Well, it's because the way you built it doesn't work for them. So if it's not working, so that when someone's not doing it, the answer is not, why aren't you doing it? Or the answer is, why aren't you doing it? It's not, you need to just do this. You need to just do what I told you to do. You can, at some point, you might have to back into that for a given show. But the big thing is, what about this doesn't work for you? Find out what that is and put it in, or figure it out, or do it for the next show. And a lot of times you're evolving these run of shows, from show to show to show. So those are the things to kind of consider. Next question.
Comes from George E. Kennedy Jr. here in the panel from Washington, D.C., and he's referencing Grant, who's also in the panel often. And he says, Grant stated that the Ursa Broadcast G2 is a broadcast studio and cinema camera. What are your thoughts on this 3 cameras in one approach?
Go ahead, Charles.
I am going to wait to see what they try to hit with this, because the needs for broadcast and studio, and especially cinema, they're very different, especially artistically. For Hollywood, usually is an ARRI camera that they use. If you have the budget, that's essentially what you're going to be using. Maybe like a Sony Venice, going to lower budget. But what I want to see is when you go from scene referred to display referred, that technical transform is different from manufacturer to manufacturer, and that's where the magic starts to happen. That's where the ARRI has a certain feel and look, which Hollywood loves and they know how to work with. So I wonder what they're going to come up with this camera for the transform. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it does.
Go ahead, George.
And for those that not Grant on the panel, but Grant Petty from Blackmagic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. In his keynote yesterday. This is a very interesting camera, Alex. It's not the 35. It's a 2/3 sensor, so it's not gonna be work for everyone. But you are able to interchange it with 4 different lens mounts. So it's at 4,000. It's very useful. And like Charles said, we have to wait and see what it's really gonna do. But I think at $4,000, if it does what it says it's gonna do, it's a worthwhile investment to just have in your hip pocket.
I will admit that I'm a real sensor snob, and I will not shoot with 2/3. So it's I won't shoot stuff with 2/3 inch chips. I just feel like it feels so TV, so yeah, sure it is broadcast, but it just feels like so like past, and also when you're working with smaller studios or smaller backgrounds, the Super 35 makes a massive difference in how big the studio feels. So a Super 35 will make your studio feel twice as big because of that depth of field. So it's just everything feels more important in Super 35 than it does at 2/3. Like that's the bottom line is that it just feels more important because you've got shorter depth of field and you've got and so I think that it's great that they came up with another 2/3. Where we do use 2/3 is when the throw is over 75 feet. So it's almost impossible to focus, even with sports folks. It's almost impossible to focus over for live over 75 feet. Your depth of field gets down to inches, like 2 or 3 inches, no matter what. On most light, football is a little different because it's outside and there's a lot of light. But outside of that, it becomes really, really difficult. And so at that point, we switch over to 2/3 inch chips. We put on box lenses, and we extend that out, and that works for us. And so having a modern 2/3 inch chip totally makes sense, and it means that it's the same color math. This gets back into what Charles was talking about. The color science is the same between the Super 35s, which I'll use under 75 feet, and the 2/3, which I'll use over 75 feet. And I mix and match those cameras, and the color science is the same. And so I love the fact that they released it. I think saying that it's a 3-in-1 camera is overstating what the camera usefulness is. For old media, it's great that they can still use their B4 lenses. So I think they have a lot of money in B4 lenses. That's what they should have said, is that, it's Blackmagic, and it's great that you can use your B4 lenses, and it's better than the first one, which was not very good. The low light on the first 2/3, their first broadcast, the low light was so bad that I got excited, like, oh, we'll use these for our long cameras. And I did tests against charts and was like, nope, I'm not buying this. So I think that I'm glad to see a G2, but I think it's not a cinema camera. Anything below Super 35 is not cinema. Go ahead, George.
I think beyond what was talked about the camera by Grant, I think it was good to hear him mention that they couldn't get the sensors from overseas, so it looks like they did all of this in-house to build this particular camera. So the whole insides are revamped.
Yeah. I think that a lot of companies are going that way. I mean, I think that the supply chain problem that we're seeing right now is rebuilding the entire supply chain, and not to the advantage of the folks that were supplying those things, because they're not able to supply them. Next question.
Comes from Alex 4D Goldner in London, often on the panel here as well, who says HDR on the web. If I wanted to make HTML-based overlays for HDR video, how do I make some web elements brighter than 255, 255, 255?
Go ahead, Charles.
So you're not going to get brighter than 255, and the difference is going to be in you triggering the PQ and the tone curve. That's essentially what you're going to have to worry about if the page can trigger that. Because if you do generate something that goes into PQ at 255, that's 10,000 nits, right? That's what PQ is going to peak at, and you don't want that, right? So what is going to happen as we all start to get more used to HDR, we have to rethink the way that we work between video and graphics. And graphics for us, let's say, depending on what's behind them, for whites, we've been sitting around between 250 and 400 at the max. And you have to start to think about consciously
you're talking
making
about
those
nits.
decisions.
Nits, right?
Yes, and nits. Because now the space that you have to work with, now you have to actually be conscious of where that sits. Before, it was just 100 nits, and that's what everybody worked to. And then the manufacturers on the TV side would stretch it out to whatever the TV could push up to. Right? So you had no control over that. That was done on each TV side individually. Now you do have control, and Alex and a bunch of people here are working that out to see how we map those things individually, because now you do get control, but you do have to make that creative decision.
One of the things you have to be careful of also is the posterization that'll happen when you start to stretch those. So you can take something and you'll take it in, and exactly what Charles was saying, where you're going to want to take those graphics to 250 to 400 nits, and you're going to look at that in Resolve, and you're going to look at that or Final Cut, or if you're pushing it, but you're going to have to push those up. If they have gradients, if they have soft textures and so on and so forth. The problem is that the 8-bit that you started with, even if you promote it to 10-bit, it's not going to help, because you only have 256 levels of gray in each channel in red, green, and blue. The 10-bit gives you 1024. The 12-bit gives you 4096. Not 4098, 4096, 4098, 4096, whatever it takes. Anyway, so so it gives you the 4096 that's there. The reason that all those gray values in each channel are important is because as you stretch out those gradients over a larger period of time, you're going to start seeing the stair steps of exposure. Now, there is one place where you can do this with web graphics. If you have web graphics and they're big, if they're SVGs or something else like that, you can actually convert them to 10-bit and then scale them down. Now, when you scale them down, the bicubic interpolation in the pieces will actually fill in a lot of that inside of 10-bit. It's not the same as having originally 10-bit, but it will do better. So if you can get something that's way oversampled, especially if you have line art, you can way oversample it at 8-bit, bring it back down to it. Now, if you have line art, oftentimes, because it's a hard number, you can also just convert it to 10-bit. But if you before you do whatever you're going to do, but if you're going to have something that is if you have something that's really big, you're looking for the largest image you can, so that when you scale it down, that bicubic calculation will mush those pixels together. But you got to do that transform inside of the 10-bit so that it does it inside of that space. Next question.
Comes from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware, and he says, what's happened to the traditional gatekeeper decision makers at corporate media clients?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, this is something that's been going on for a while, and I have a theory about it. This is just me speculating, but I went through it back right after 9/11. I was doing a lot of corporate work, and I saw what I considered the hollowing out of the middle of a lot of my corporate clients, which is to say that the line employees who are actually doing the work, they need to make the widgets, or they need to get the paperwork shuffled or whatever. So they were pretty, you couldn't cut too deep into that. The executive suite, obviously the C-suite's going to protect itself, plus they're doing strategic stuff. And even though their salaries are really big, there are a few of them. So what you got is the middle people who had been institutionally in place for a long time and had salary growing. Those people were the easiest way to control costs by shedding headcount. So you saw a hollowing out, in my experience, of a lot of people with institutional wisdom, and they got knocked out of the industry. So that was the first big thing. This one seems to be a little different, but because people are resigning rather than getting tossed out because of the pandemic, but still you have this hollowing out of the higher end of the middle. And I think that is hurting decision making across all the corporations I look at and work with.
Go ahead,
It's
Mitchell.
just you don't have that same quality of people in that upper middle tier.
Mitchell?
I concur with Bill. I think what and the reason I brought it up is it's an unfortunate statement of affairs, is that the people that used to be the gatekeepers not only knew their jobs, but they knew the jobs of the people that they were considering to take them on. And that knowledge, as Bill says very eloquently, is being hollowed out. So your consideration as a user tends to skew towards your pricing as opposed to your creativity and your ability to do the work.
I think it really depends on the corporation. I think that the most corporations that are larger, so smaller corporations, I think make a lot of really odd decisions. Larger corporations understand that the most expensive cost in a production is failure. Like if it doesn't go well, if it goes badly, someone's gonna, it can affect people's long-term trajectory within the company, for large events. And so at that point, they tend not to be as cost sensitive. So especially if you mention like there's a high risk that this could go sideways or do this or do that. Sometimes they'll still do it, but I think that larger corporations, larger brands tend to be more brand centric and more brand sensitive, and they tend to spend more money on things and not be as they want to make sure it's going to work, and so they make decisions. But you're right that smaller corporations, when they don't understand that, and I think that one of the things is that it's a matter of us educating them as well and creating better products, that they can see. When you try to tell them about how to make a better event, it's kind of like saying, it's round for kids, it's a hula hoop, like how do you explain a hula hoop? Anyway, so that's the challenge there. Next question.
Okay, moving on to Mitchell Hill of Wilmington, Delaware, again here on the panel. It says, if you wanted to place a LUT between your camera and HDMI input on your ATEM Mini, what would you use?
Go, Jason.
I would use an ATEM Mini converter. Just about all of them will support that. Does the bidirectional, Alex?
Oh no, it doesn't. You know what? It doesn't.
Wait a minute, that's too small.
No, it's the 6G. It's the 6G. No, it's not this one. There's a 6G SDI to HDMI converter that will load a LUT, and that's the one you want. I think it's like $495. But it'll you can put a LUT into it, and we've actually done exactly what you're talking about, which is that we'll load the LUT. We had to take a Sony F55 and match it to the Blackmagic cameras. Charles had to match it to the Blackmagic cameras. Anyway, but using that, we were able to take the raw feed from the camera, send it to Charles, have him do the color correction, and send it back. And we put it back in the box, and that way it matched up with everything else that we were using. Yeah, so but I believe it's the 6G SDI to HDMI converter. Go ahead, Charles.
I haven't seen it, but is there an HDMI to HDMI in out LUT bugs? Because all the ones that I've seen before, it's like the one that you mentioned, like the SDI to HDMI, but it's usually SDI.
We had to convert it. We had to convert it to HDMI and then run it in. So there was one more box there. It was like a HDMI to SDI and then SDI back to get to the LUT. It was, I think I have to go back and look. We were doing SDI though, so I think I'm wrong. It was we had an SDI workflow, so when we looped it through, it let us add a LUT on the loop when we went through the SDI. So, but it was it took us a while to figure that it would work. So it was Jason.
Does the newer up down cross? I think that might support a LUT.
Oh, from Blackmagic.
For Blackmagic.
It might. That would be something to check out. Next question.
Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware. Again, this time he says, what's your preferred editing workflow?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I think it depends in part on the kind of editor you are, what kind of tasks you have in front of you. For me, since I'm a Final Cut editor and have the advantage of all of the metadata tools in it, It's analyze the job that needs to be done for me, ingest all the footage from it, go through a robust reject path, because 90% of what I've probably shot or has been shot for me is going to be useless to me. Once I get that reject pass done, then it's just a series of loops of analyze what I have, what I'm trying to say, and then iterate and try it again, revise, iterate, revise, iterate. That's the process until you get to where you're happy. And then you master and send it out. That's kind of my thinking.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree, and it also depends on what's the ultimate use of the project, because different projects require different tools. And if I'm doing a graphics-heavy job, I tend to gravitate towards the Adobe workflow, because I can develop an Illustrator, create animations and After Effects, and then I can bring it all into Premiere and have a lot of degrees of control back and forth. If I was doing a documentary program, I probably would lean towards an Avid system, something like that. Although I use Avid less and less, to be honest with you. It's just gotten a little, it's fast, but it's a little boring to use.
I have to admit, anything that I need to do that's going to need to be done in any kind of time frame is done in Final Cut. It's just a lot faster than everything else, in my opinion. And it's just more fluid for me. I do most of my graphics. I do some graphics in After Effects, but only the stuff I can't do in Motion. So I'm very 3D heavy, and the 3D engine inside of Motion is, I believe, is better than what the Element platform inside of Final Cut. So I mean, inside of After Effects. So I think the engine is better. And so being able to have USDZ models that I can animate and so on and so forth, which I do a lot of. I also use the 3D text a lot. I use 3D a lot because I come with a 3D background. So Motion becomes really useful in those areas for me. I still do anything that has HDR in it. I know that Final Cut supports it, but the way that it does it, it's kind of in this weird automatic way of doing things, and it doesn't give me the very specific tools that I want. So anytime I'm dealing with HDR or log footage, and I'm shooting B-RAW, I immediately go into Resolve, and I will do most of my stuff there, because I have to admit the channels, when I'm doing, like, a lot of what I've been doing recently has been lots of audio channels, and I know that Final Cut handles channels inside of rolls, but it's not the same when I'm trying to, like, manage 16 channels of surround sound. It's not the same. Like, the rolls is not the same as just having channels. It's very confusing if things start moving around even if they're in rolls. It's very confusing to do immersive in Final Cut. I've tried, I've given up. So anyway, so I think that those are the things that, so I definitely swing in between those. I haven't used Premiere for 20 years, but I've heard that it's great. Next question.
Jens is up next in Sandpoint, Idaho. And Jens says, in a $100 to $200 budget, what presentation clicker would you recommend?
Go ahead, John.
So the gold standard in this space is the DSAN. It doesn't fit your range, your price range.
Oh man, but you should do it anyway.
You should do it anyway.
Don't do anything else. Like, it's more expensive, and it's worth every single penny. Now, there is a small one for $359. So there's a small one for $359 that is better, but it's like, there's nothing close. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So it really also depends on what you're using it for. If it's for a bigger production, I then go for the
if you want it to work.
I actually used one in my presentations, and the one thing that I found was I was always looking at it because I didn't know where the button system was. So if you're talking like a really small room of 8 or 10 people, there's no middle of the road between the $700 DSAN and the $50 clickers. So I would suggest, if you don't need that much power and you're doing it in a small room, go with the Logitech, because then people understand that one, they know that one, they don't have to look at their hand every single time to click to the next slide.
Go ahead, George.
Jeffrey, I love you, but get the power. The micro, like
I agree. I totally agree.
I own 3 of the micros. I love them. Like Alex said, it's at the bottom of the pile, but the micros work pretty well. They're back order right now on B&H, but if you could swing it, I would add the $159 and get the micro version of the DSAN Perfect Q.
There it is. So this is the I knew it was around here somewhere. So this is the micro. This plugs into your computer. That's gonna with the little transmitter here. And I don't know. I mean, when you get the simple one here, that's forward and back. I mean, it's pretty easy to remember what it is, and every speaker that we work with knows what this is. And if you hand, I will say, if you're doing something professional, you hand anything that looks anything different than this box to a professional speaker, and they will decide that you don't know what you're doing. Just so you know, like you can do it for your, littler projects, but if you're going to hand it to a professional that does this all the time, they're going to expect that pickle to be that pickle, not something else. And they will make decisions about your production. I've seen it. Like they will make decisions about your production quality based on the fact that you didn't hand them a DSAN. It is so standard in what we do, and their website is so bad. It's hard to figure out exactly what to order and where. But I've had every size of them: the mini, the full. We have I used to have 10 of these things, and it's so I don't, they barely give me the time of day. I barely can get the order in. They're one of those companies that does something really well and then doesn't talk to you at all. But I will say that after doing so many clickers and so many things, it's just spend the money. This is a buy one, cry once thing. I would just highly recommend not going on anything in between. Just save the money, sell some, sell something, sell some eggs, do something, find a way to pay for it. Next question.
Keith Harrison's up next from London, and he says, can anyone confirm if webcam settings work with macOS Monterey?
Go ahead, Dennis.
I haven't played with it on Monterey yet, but one thing I discovered recently on Big Sur is that it won't talk to the built-in webcam.
It not only will not talk to it, it'll turn it off, and you have to restart the computer.
Right.
Yeah, it's security. Yeah, Bill?
I was just going to say, if you're going to do stuff in Monterey that you haven't done before, practice. I switched last night to Monterey, and I got up this morning and I came in to set up the show, and a couple of things, particularly Sidecar, had completely changed, and I fumbled. So I had to have more time. Thankfully, I allowed it this morning, but there are quite a few changes in the Monterey construction, particularly of internal things. So just pay attention to that.
Yeah, I'm actually almost certain that it actually does work in Monterey. I have some Monterey machines, and but I'm not certain. But Dennis is absolutely correct that it does not work with your internal, and nothing will. It's a security feature to make sure that you can't sneak in and turn on somebody's webcam. So if you have a Brio or something, it should work just fine. Next question.
Next one comes from Peter Rosado in Las Vegas, Nevada. And Peter says, is there a preferred mic connector for the $15 ME2 suggested by John Ittelson at All Electronics? And can there be a second hour for the newbies trying to do this?
I think we'll probably do a lab. I bought one. John Ittelson found on All Electronics. There was a Sennheiser ME2 that was $15. It's normally like $120. It just doesn't have a connector on the other end. And so a bunch of us just went up and got it. I think with shipping, it's like $25. I just got it because I thought it'd make a good lab. So if you go up to All Electronics, we can sell them out, and then a couple of us will have them, and we'll solder them together. So so stay tuned for that. It'll be some lab some afternoon in the next couple of weeks. Next question.
Eddie Scott out of Mission Viejo, California says, I received a mMatrix plugin package from the Final Cut Pro Summit this week. It installs, but when I scroll over the preview, it displays a large T and a warning triangle in preview. Any help there?
That should be a registration issue with mMatrix. So that's the VFX Motion plugins, and you're somewhere in the registration you don't have it. You're not coded in. That's why it's not showing up. So I think you have to go to, I think it's like in the help menu or the measurement or the register. You're looking for a registration. That's what you're missing. Next question.
Gil Carter in Brisbane, Australia says, what are the first impressions from the new Blackmagic Ursa Broadcast G2 camera announced today?
I think we kind of gave those already.
That I didn't know about.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know about it until someone brought it up. I think that it's great that they do a G2. I bet you the chip's a lot better, and I still won't shoot anything real with 2/3 inch chip unless I'm shooting more than 75 feet. I don't know if anyone else has any other opinions. Next question.
Georgie Kennedy Jr., Washington, D.C. is still on the Blackmagic trail here. With Blackmagic has updated their micro and bi-directional converters to 12G SDI. Will you add these little gems to your kit?
Go ahead, George.
And the answer is yes. I'm answering my own question, and I apologize. But I think the good thing what they have done, they've kept the 3G, so you have 6 options now. So these are definitely. I even use them for Zoom ISO to pass through to go to my deck link and to my ATEM Mini ISO. So these are a good option if you're looking for the low budget converters, and they work pretty well.
That's great. And these were just released yesterday. Was this during that keynote?
Yes, so it's updated to Ultra HD, and he has kept the 3G versions.
Was there any other announcements that we missed from Blackmagic?
That was it. He just announced those first, and then he announced the G2.
Got it.
Do we know when to expect them?
I think I didn't see them on B&H last night, but they should be available.
Very good. Next question.
George Butters, coming to us from Halifax, Nova Scotia, says according to today's New York Times, most big bosses want everyone back in the office, and he has a link there. So discuss, I guess.
It's going to be an interesting decade between the bosses that want everyone to come back to the office and the bosses that take all their workers because they say, hey, you can work at home. That's what's going to happen, is that there's a bunch of big bosses that it'll depend on how much leverage they have as to whether they can bring people back to the office. If there's other options, I just know that a lot of the folks that I'm working with that are in different companies, large companies, aren't saying they're going to quit. They just say that they're freshening up LinkedIn, and they're making connections, and they're trying to figure out what their next step is. So there's this huge, and the problem really for companies is when people get into that mindset, it's not just that they leave, it's that they're thinking about leaving all the time. They're surfing LinkedIn all the time. They're, networking, so that not networking to find more things to bring into the company, but networking to figure out how they get out. And so you end up with basically half of the efficiency that you would normally have from everyone. So the hard press for this does a lot more damage than it looks like, because you have a lot of people that are just trying to think about how to move, and so and then there's companies that are going to go after them. I think that we forget that technical skills they don't grow on trees. And so companies are constantly trying to poach each other's employees. And if you're willing to allow them more flexible work schedules, that's going to be, it used to be like, oh, we give you free lunches, or, oh, we have a 401k, or we have insurance, or whatever. Flexible hours is probably the number one leverage point that companies have now. And they're going to, the companies that are willing to are going to use it to take everybody else's, take other people's employees. That's what's going to happen here. So the old fashioned companies that want everyone to come back to an office, that want to put them into a little cattle corral called the open office system, or whatever they want to call it, with the little open desks, otherwise known as the cattle corral. That's the mistake they made. No one wants to go back to that. That's the thing. They've had privacy for the last year and a half, and no one wants to go back to an open office. So if you gave people great offices and free food and really good connections and so on and so forth, you might be able to lure some of them back. But they're not going to go back to an open office. Or they will, not your best workers. That's the real problem. Next question.
Mark Giuliani in Alexandria, Virginia, says, I have 5 sets of Sony UTXB03/UTXP03 lav mics. Do these need to be replaced to comply with the newer FCC frequencies, or can they be reprogrammed to use the new frequencies?
Go ahead, Bill.
We ran through this with the great UHF VHF transcode, and then the television grabbed a lot of the spectrum. The thing that I noticed is that if you're going to do something with them, particularly if you eventually decide that, no, I can't, I've researched it, and I don't know the specifics of these units, whether they're frequency agile or not, whether their blocks are movable or not by sending them back. But if they're not, remember that all of those small wireless transmitter and receiver things are relatively local. So if they don't work in the USA because of FCC, they may still have some value overseas in a lot of markets. So don't delay. If you're going to switch the whole thing, do it pretty quickly before everybody gets flooded with these things because of the change.
Good. Jeffrey?
So, and I'm trying to remember his name. I'd interview him every single year at NAB, and I asked him that question: can these things be reprogrammed to the new frequencies? And the answer is absolutely no, because it's hard coded into the system. As Bill says, some frequencies will work in other countries, so being able to either gift them or sell them in another country is an option. Also, with these belt packs, they're usually in a wide spectrum, so there's always one or two frequencies that don't fall into that range. I don't have all the belt packs, so I can't say for certain, but I know I do have one that crosses into the bad range, and I just have to stay away from those frequencies, and I can still use the lavaliers as backups, if anything.
Next question.
Richard Drusty here in the panel from Peoria, Illinois, says Eventide released a new plugin, Split EQ, that addresses transients and tonal aspects. It's very innovative. Discuss.
Good, Michael.
Yeah, they released this great plugin. They even have a patent on it. And it looks to address the attacks and how you can shape the attacks, the transients, and then shape the body of the sound. So going into like the body of a drum, a bass drum has often been hard to, you could just EQ it normally, and that's about all you could do. But here you can EQ the attack and then EQ the body of the sound, the tonal aspect of the sound.
That's great.
And yeah, it's just a tremendous plugin. It's $88 at Audio Deluxe, and very nice.
That's fantastic. Next question.
Jens is back from Sandpoint, Idaho with another one. Does anyone else have a good DEX documents to explain how to up your Zoom game? I've given a couple of speeches to local groups and want to further refine the presentation to educate more people.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Jen, that's an excellent idea. It's one of the reasons I'm on this panel, because I really feel we need to educate our clients and other friends that use Zoom how to improve it. And I think the best way to do it is to create a short, concise, and informative video. But I had one additional thought. Instead of me doing it, maybe office hours needs to embrace this and make it a project that we all bring our collective heads together and make something good. I think it would work really well. In the meantime, if you just need something, just get a T-shirt that says "No virtual backgrounds" on it, and you're good to go.
You're 90% there. Go ahead, Charles.
So sometimes I forget how hard this group plays each time I interact with normal folk outside. And about once a week, I still share the Jeff Francis video that he did over a year ago.
Yeah.
On how to just quickly get yourself up to sound and look a bit more normal. And so I would start there. If you look on YouTube, it's Jeff Francis Zoom, and it'll come up.
One of the things I have to do this all the time, and one of the things that I want to do is actually, I know this will sound crazy, but the easiest way to do this is to do an Airbnb and just do the setups there, so we don't have to clean it up, we don't have to figure anything out. We just set up something that makes it work and get somebody to come in and sit there and do it. It seems like it's overkill, but I think that, to your point, Jens, into Mitchell's, into Charles, like really digging into it and doing like a mixture of PDF, video, stills, so on and so forth, would be really successful. I think it's a great idea for an office hours project. So let's keep thinking about that. Next question.
Tyler Darlington here in San Diego near me says, do you foresee Blackmagic adding the ability to communicate to a streaming bridge with their Pocket Cinema line, similar to the broadcast cameras announced last night? Whoops, you're muted, Alex.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
It'd be really nice. And I'm really surprised because somebody did the Raspberry Pi alternative that somebody hasn't come out with a third party that allows you to do a streaming bridge similar to that. But yeah, it would be really nice if they did do it. I haven't heard any rumblings from Blackmagic saying that they're going to cross over the streaming bridge as of yet, but they keep pretty tight-lipped on a lot of that stuff.
It's probably going to be something that just comes out as an update for the camera. Like it'll probably be it could be in the next couple of weeks.
We did it in firmware, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next with Telos offers the Infinity virtual intercom platform. He's got a link there, but they don't publish prices like Unity. Has anyone used it? And why could that be that they don't publish the prices?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, I can't answer the question of why, but I can tell you it's something brand new, and Frank Foti and his gang over there at Telos are very, very clever people, and they know IP audio very well because they have many other products in that line. So I can only offer optimism as to the direction it's going in. Price-wise, don't know.
So far, what they've done is they've really placed themselves between Unity and ClearCom. So that's been most of the price points that they've looked at. So they've had some hardware development. I think that one of the advantages that they're adding over Unity is the ability to tie into the hardware comms that they've already built. So the problem with Unity is that you have to use like Dante boxes or tie something in. There's no hardware expression for Unity, or not very much. It's always cobbled together. ClearCom has all the stuff. You can tie everything back into their hardware, but it's a lot more expensive. Telos is kind of fitting into the, kind of cutting that gap. We have great audio. We can give you that platform, and then but we also have the rack mountable control panels and the other things that you need to make that actually work. I think it's a really smart thing. We should bring them on. If someone puts it in the second hour, I've already talked to them about this, obviously. so I'd be happy to bring them on. I think it'd be a great second hour. So just put it in the second hour in Discord, and we'll take it into account. Next question.
Comes from our friend Jonas Dattel in Stuttgart, Germany. And he says, with the latest update, the Blackmagic Design 3G microconverters can now map 5.1 channels. What could this be used for?
Go ahead, Jason.
It's going to save you a lot of time and money in audio embedding.
Well, and specifically for 5.1 surround. So now you can sit there and map those. And so 5.1 is pretty slick. May get more support in other platforms soon. So I think that being able to do 5.1, and I'd say 5.1 is like 80% of what we would think of as spatial. I mean, it really gets around. It doesn't go over your head or fully behind, but it does a pretty good job of doing a lot there. So being able to map all of those channels is pretty useful. Next question.
Georgie Kennedy Jr., Washington, D.C. Is Zoom hurting the lower end of the production industry?
Go ahead, George.
So I probably could have expanded that question some more, but what I'm seeing, I've gotten at least 3 RFPs in the past couple of weeks to try to pursue that are all due like in January. But what a lot of what the scope of work is calling for is the client supplying you with all the Zoom recordings. And what's going to happen there is a lot of bad recordings, and you now have to try, and there are tight deadlines. So you not only have to edit that video, you have to clean up all of that audio, and you could find yourself in a really jam. So I'm seeing a lot of, now that there's a little shift in a lot of lower end productions where the client wants to record all the content and send it to you and then give you these tight little, due dates. And I see, I've turned them down because I see being on office hours has taught me a lot about, well, obviously audio and recording Zoom meetings, but also not overextending yourself. And I'm seeing a lot of where you could run into a lot of trouble taking on these jobs, and then now you have to clean up all that audio and other processes.
We once had a client that that said, how much would it cost for you to shoot and do, it's like 8 hours of green screen? And I said, $25,000. And they said, well, how much if we shoot it and give it to you? And I said, $35,000. It's like, I just want to make sure you're clear. It's way more work for me for you to do it, for you to shoot bad green screen and hand it to me than me to shoot perfect green screen and not have to touch it. Because that's how we do our green screens. And when we do interviews, it's like you just touch it and everything goes away and all the hair details there and everything else. And so I was like, I don't want to deal with somebody else's Yahoo version of green screen. And so it's the same thing where, it's way more work if you're not capturing it, for yourself. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, that's true. And George, you're absolutely right. On my end, I do a lot of production with corporations. And during pandemic world, it was a necessity to send things over via Zoom or Teams. And unfortunately, with that comes, it's like when typography was replaced with laser printers and people were setting their own type. There's a really bad collection of bad type and stuff came out. Well, now that Zoom has given the tools to corporations and people in general, to do what they think is appropriate, like virtual backgrounds, one of my favorite refrains. I'm getting a lot of bad stuff that requires fixing for various reasons, and sometimes I get blamed for it. They say, well, it was a great show except for that part that I sent you. What can you do to fix that? And I said, if it isn't there, I can't fix it. I can mask it a little bit. But I think some of the motivation that comes from the client is that they think it's my job to not only send the picture of me saying whatever it is I have to say, but I have to enhance it somehow. So I'm going to use the skin tone, the blur filter, and other things to enhance it. And they don't realize that that's all done in post-production. I can do a much better job of, like Alex says, doing a green screen if you just send me the very best image you can. So don't blame Zoom. Blame the people that are using it.
I mean, I think over time, we're going through that zone where everyone's trying to save money. I mean, literally, my entry into the market was because I was an intern that learned how to use Photoshop and Quark, and they fired their ad agency because I was doing work that they decided. I don't know whether I was really doing work better than their ad agency, but they decided it was good enough. It was good enough to do it at $3.50 an hour. That it was a lot better than an ad agency, and so they took it away and gave me a nice computer system, and I went about my merry way. So I can't say that I'm completely against it. Like, this is what happens. This is when a digital transformation happens. But what happens over time is that the person doing my kind of work, I was doing it for $3.50 an hour, but 2 years later, I was doing it for $120 an hour. It changes over time as far as skill sets. The one thing I will say is that there's always clients that are trying to find the cheapest way to do things, and they don't understand how much damage they're doing to their audience. So they're basically, what happens is when you put out bad content, they're not going to come back, or it gets harder. It's like crying wolf. It just gets harder and harder and harder to bring your audience back to you if you don't produce something that's worth watching, and that's what we tell clients. And to your point, George, I just turn the stuff down. If I'm not going to record it, I'm not going to work on it. Like, I just, I don't, because it's our work, and it's going to reflect on us either way. And what happens though is that if you do a great job with someone, they think about other ways to work with you, and the money stops being important when quality is really there and when the whole show comes together. And if you don't, then they figure out how to do it cheaper. Next question.
Comes from Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York. Davinci Resolve 17 is the topic, and he says, I believe is not using my GPU to render, though I've got a 3070. CPU goes to 100%. I've tried switching in preferences to manual and CUDA, but no joy. Any ideas?
Go ahead, Charles.
So a friend of mine recently built a new rig with two 3090s, and when he switched to Resolve 17, we had a similar issue, and we essentially switched out the motherboard, and that fixed it.
Wow.
I don't know if that's a viable solution for you, but that was the only thing that we did that fixed it. And it's the only time that I've seen it was on a Windows machine.
Interesting. All right, next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California says, do sitcoms with a studio audience fit into future media, maybe virtual audiences?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I think they fit perfectly into future because basically sitcoms become like concerts. They become like stage shows. They need audiences for that. You'll go to Los Angeles and then you'll make a day of it. You'll visit the studio and then you'll watch a show. So it's a tourist attraction for the most part, and that's the same thing with game shows because they want to have that physical audience. They don't want to have that laugh box to create fake laughter. And I know there's a lot of production companies that say that we will never use a laugh box for their shows. So I think it's very viable.
Your audio is dropping out, Jeffrey. It sounds like some kind of NDI issue. Number 643. Why I don't use NDI. Anyway, what I will say, I guess, about that is I don't know where sitcoms and even game shows fit into the future of media. I don't, that was done because you didn't have a lot of money, and now, the problem that TV has is that they're no longer the big game, even film. I mean, now the big game is Apple and Amazon and Netflix, and they're spending incredible amounts of money on big projects where we're now no longer talking about little numbers like $25,000 a minute. We're talking $75,000 a minute, $250,000 a minute, kind of, $1 million a minute. kind of budgets. I think Foundation is near $1 million a minute, and so I think that in that world, filling time cheaply isn't as viable. Like it just doesn't, because people, they now have other things to fill their time, and we have the entire back catalog of everything that we had when we grew up. I mean, I'm slowly working through Person of Interest with my kids, and we're just watching one episode after another. And when we finish that, we'll finish something else. So there's just, you're competing with too many things that make to take just filler time and use it, which is game shows and everything else. I think the next version of game shows will be esports. Like it's not going to be more of the filler. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again with Roland. The company has released the JX08 and JX08 boutique units, and he's got a link there. Considering the same modeling engine is available in their Xenology software, where do you see the advantage of the boutiques?
I don't know if we have the right audience to have this. Go ahead, Michael. Michael's here. Sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
Sure. It's a great piece, and you can have a lot of fun playing with the knobs and the lights. And it's a lot of fun if you don't have any synthesizers and it's your first synthesizer, it would be a tremendous thing to have. Now, that being said, I'm all in the box. So I have all my virtual synthesizers. I've gotten rid of my synthesizers about 10 years ago and gone all in the box. So it depends on how you want to work. And if you want things saved and presets saved, the Xenology software is excellent, and you can get that sound. And other companies have replications of it also that you can get.
That's great. Next question.
Comes from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. Noah asks, what is truly slowing down a multi-site turnkey video streaming studio solution from happening today?
Go ahead, Jason.
One word. Bandwidth. That's it.
I don't know if anything's holding us back. I mean, that's what I have at Own I Know. So that's exactly what we do. So I think it's just, it does take, you can try to do, thought about doing it in the cloud, but having a lot of hardware makes it easier, in my opinion. But it's already existing there. We're not the only ones that have started to piece those together. Next question.
Jens in Sandpoint, Idaho says, what's a good speaker timer for small meetings? Just need 10-minute countdown with a remote reset. Budget friendly could be great since I just spent $360 on a DSAN. Dangers of office hours.
Go ahead, Jason.
We are dangerous friends indeed. There are a fair number of these that cost almost nothing. Stage Timer from Projectionist is great. And the one from 99 Images is also good. I'm blanking on its name.
I need to need to tell you that DSAN makes a speaker timer as well, just in case you're wondering. Like there's a speaker timer there. It's only $800 and some dollars, but there is a speaker timer there that's there. So that's one of the other things that they do. I don't actually use that one, so I'm not going to keep on pushing you down that path because it's a lot of money for not very much. There's software ones that we use. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, speaking of software ones, there's a lot of apps on the App Store that have nice little ones. I use one called Mini Timer that does countdowns and flashes yellow for warning and red and blinks if your speaker is running over. So this implementation is in a lot of apps as well.
The one that we've used the most is called Speaker Timer Pro by DT Video Labs. They also make the Playback Pro, which we stopped using because it wasn't as stable, but the speaker timer actually is still something we've used in the past. And the nice thing about its software, it just runs out of a monitor, and you can do little subtle things like make it run just a little bit faster so that you can speed it's great. You can just have it run, quietly faster to move speakers along, because they'll sit there and hurry up near the end, and you'll be on time. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California, back with, as freelancers and business owners, our schedules can be feast or famine. Do you have any built-in protections from when your schedule starts getting out of hand? For example, just too much back-to-back work.
Go ahead, Charles.
So usually when you get into that situation, it's a financial issue, and that's when you need to really learn how to mitigate and plan out your finances. The first thing that I learned when I started as a junior person in a bigger company was I taught you save enough for the company to if no work comes for 1 month, everybody still gets paid. And then you build that out to 2 months and 3 months, and you build that out to a year, right? So that way you have the ability to be flexible with the types of jobs that you can get and take. In the beginning, of course, it's going to be difficult, especially now that a lot more people are looking to start their own companies and work from home. At first, it's going to be a struggle, but make sure that your finances are set in a way that if you hit a drought, you can still pay your bills, your mortgage, get food, take care of the family. That's the first thing that I would do. After that, it alleviates the stress and the headache that you would have.
Jeffrey, real quick.
There are people like me that can do one-off contracts, and so when you're at famine, you don't need to worry about paying me.
Next question.
Jack B in Phoenix, Arizona has what may be our last one in the regular show. What synths have people gotten since the last time we discussed synths on the panel? I have gotten the Crave and the TD-3-RD, and I'm creating music with my daughter who is loving it.
I think I don't know when the last time we talked about it was. I can't spin my camera over there right now, but I have the Crave and the Poly D and the 2600.
I love how you warned everybody, and independently of that, they just did it anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, I got a bunch of stuff, and I play with it, but I haven't gotten serious about it because I'm like, if I dig into this, I'm going to lose too much time. So I have been kind of sitting out on it a little bit, but that's what I've gotten so far. All right, Jeffrey, real quick.
I just got done doing some reviews of the Uno Synth. I got the box here. I got the synths over there. So the Uno Synth Pro, the Uno Synth Drum, and the Uno Synth, and they're working. They're older, but they're really nice little synths.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to invite our guests to jump on. Jeff, Jack, and Eli, if you want to turn your cameras on. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Alex.
Hey. Just we're waiting for Jack here, if he's available. There we go. Hey, Jack.
Hey, sorry, move my desk up.
No worries. So we're changing subjects to our second hour, and we have Eli Stonberg, Jack Greiner, and Jeff Greco from Hovercast. So they've been kind enough to join us and to basically tell us what Hovercast is. This was a request by our membership. People were looking at Hovercast going by. People were putting in the second hour like, hey, let's have these guys on. And so we thought we'd bring them on. And so we're really glad to have you. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Can you tell us a little bit about how long has Hovercast been around? How long have you been doing this?
We've been officially incorporated since late 2018. But the real origin comes from 2015. Jeff and I, we used to be music video directors, and we were doing interactive videos for a bunch of big rock stars and rappers and things like that. And we got hired by Old Spice in 2015 to create a live action video game on Twitch. It became the Old Spice Nature Adventure, which was basically a man was in the woods. He had no free will, and he was controlled by the viewers on Twitch. We built early software to kind of power that dynamic. And then a few years later, we kept getting hired to do these kind of interactive co-created experiences. And so after rebuilding the same software 3 or 4 times, we just said, screw it, let's stop being directors and let's make software that can help other people do interactive live streaming. And here we are.
And tell us a little about what Hovercast does.
So we have a product called Hovercast Pro, and it's all about empowering the viewers to interact with a live stream. So this works cross-platform, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, white label players, anything like that. And it's interactive graphics. I can toggle some on right here. You can see on my Zoom. We have all sorts of interactive graphics that work on these platforms and allow audiences, mostly through chat, to vote on polls, interact with comments on screen. We have gameplay elements, all sorts of really fun ways of engaging. And then we give broadcasters and brands the tools to moderate and curate that interaction as they see fit. So there's a lot of really good kind of brand safety stuff because everyone wants their projects to be more interactive, but as you guys probably know, there's lots of trolls out there. So you really have to dial it in, and we give you really robust tools to do that.
That's great. That's great. And so you can interact, or do you have your own platform, or do you mostly interact with the social comments that are out there already?
Both. And I can show you if you'd like me to pull up some
absolutely.
demos. Yeah.
Please do.
Okay, great.
And while Eli's walking through this, make sure to ask any questions that may come up for you in the audience. Go ahead.
Would you enable screen sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. Dennis, can you set him up with a co-host?
While we're doing that, here's another look. We do a lot of fundraising shows. We work with a lot of political clients. I should mention some of our clients include Bernie Sanders, a bunch of Democrats. We worked with Tom Steyer, Andrew Yang, Georgia Dems, and then a lot of brands and advertisers. So Old Spice, Audi, E3, etc.
That's great.
Okay, so I will share my screen. Okay, you guys can see this.
Yes.
So here's here's Hovercast Pro. This is the editor. You can see it's like an Adobe product for interactive live streaming. We have all sorts of widgets that can toggle things on and off. Here's just some fun stuff. We can add stickers really easily and pull chats. Right now I have a Twitch channel that's like a chicken live stream up here. So if you see comments about chickens, that you know what that is.
So Twitch.
That's the most wholesome comments I could find, basically. So yeah, as you can see, there's a few widgets going on. I'll just sort of take you through. Here's a map widget, and we can change where the location is. We can zoom in or out of the map, and we can track people as they walk around. Here is kind of a featured chat widget, which is great. We love this for Q&A and other just sort of audience sentiment, putting up chat one at a time. Here's an example of
how much design control do they have? Does the user have as far as what that widget looks like?
Tons. So as you can see, there's a lot of design features here. We could change the image, the background, etc. We also often work with clients who have their own designers who are more comfortable sending us their Figma, their Photoshop, and we'll integrate it from there.
And do you have to do that, or is that something that they do?
It works both ways. I mean, when we work with someone on a first-time basis, we often do it for them, but we love to have repeat clients, of course, that we train to be able to design in Hovercast.
Now, I see custom CSS. Is something they can use CSS to design the look and feel of those widgets?
That's right.
That's great.
Yeah. So, this is an HTML drop-in layer for encoders. And
so this is just generating HTML5.
Yeah, ultimately we've got the output is HTML, HTML5, and yeah. So if it's we provide a lot of WYSIWYG controls for folks who want to be sort of more point and click. But if you do have a designer who is skilled with CSS, that's when they can kind of take things next level. And you've got sort of all of the options available to you there.
That's great. And so I saw there you can have it set up so that you can do a green screen key or a Luma key, or with HTML5 you have alphas as well. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Typically we're typically in situations where we can output a key and a fill, or use alpha. But once in a while it comes up that somebody just wants to do a straight HDMI out from their laptop with a full screen browser, and so we've got Chroma handy for that.
And is this able to see a Blackmagic card? Or a video card to put the key fill out?
Not directly, but it works really nicely with vMix or something like that to do that.
Got it. Very good.
So one of the things I'd love to show is this audience dashboard. Basically, we can take in, we kind of pride ourselves on the different integrations. So as you can see here, you can integrate all sorts of different things into Hovercast, and it all comes in to this audience dashboard. Right now I'm taking in 2 Twitch streams, but you could have YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, all coming in this one spot. And from here, you can have moderators choosing, I want to approve this comment, or I want to change this comment to remove something. There's all sorts of things you can do. And so then you can access that comment from inside the editor and access any of those columns that you just saw here, and just tap a comment onto screen. The other thing, to kind of complete this feedback loop, we also have to get this interaction to the talent, right? And so that's why we've made this host mode, which kind of is like an interactive teleprompter. So you can see here are the active widgets that I have up. So this can be viewed on a mobile phone, an iPad, or a TV on set. And so you could have a talent say, oh, Emma P says, so cute sounding. Thanks, Emma. Or looks like we have a poll and Mars is beating Jupiter right now. So it kind of gives the talent the ability to engage with the audience in real time.
That's great. And go ahead.
Sure. So why don't I share another piece to this? I'm just going to switch over to a new tab. I guess, yeah, cool. So the other piece to this is we do have our own, you asked about our own platform. Often our clients want to work across platform and be on YouTube or whatnot, but we do have the ability to make custom branded websites. And so here's an example of our own platform branded for this event called Emerge Across America. You can see we have a Vimeo player dropped in here, but we use
could be anything, right? Just anything
player agnostic. We like Amazon IVS or YouTube or Vimeo. And we have our own chat here. This is Hovercast chat. We have a photo uploader. Here's an example of an ActBlue embeddable donation platform. And there's all sorts of things we can kind of add to this, depending on what our client wants, whether it's Zoom breakout links or other kind of virtual event things. Here's an example of Bernie Sanders, who's still an active client. Here's his page. He sometimes has the ActBlue embed as well. And this stuff looks great on mobile too. Yeah.
Great. And how does the price structure work? Like how do people hire you?
Yeah, so we're a SaaS product. For profit, we are like for brands and such, we are $3,000 a month. For nonprofits, we're $1,000 a month. And we have special pricing for production partners like you guys, sort of a referral type of program. Because really, honestly, for folks like you, we prefer the client to pay for it, not you guys. Yeah, we love working with other production companies.
That's great. That's great. I think we have a couple questions rolling in. We're gonna go ahead and throw it to the audience. Let's go ahead, Bill.
Okay, the first one comes in from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, your company was born in the political fundraising community. Have you ever had challenges finding clients outside of it because of that reason?
I don't think so. Actually, we were born, we started with brands, and we just kind of found that brands were fun to work with, but they were sort of not recurring. Like there'd be a flashy branded project and then they'd go away. And so that's when we were like, Jeff worked at Obama Foundation, and he had the idea, let's use this during the 2020 cycle to help raise money during live streams, because we can do all of this fun stuff to promote donations, showing donor names at the bottom of the screen, showing a cool meter that animates with a GIF when it's filled up all the way, etc. So we had fun in that cycle, but as you guys know, politics is also cyclical. And so we're now doing cool things with other types of organizations. One of the exciting projects we're doing is called Expo 2020, which is the World's Fair happening right now in Dubai. We're doing 100 live streams for them. That's a kind of interactive tours where the audience can control these tour guides. It's Jack built this awesome kind of IRL streamer backpack that the tour guides take around. And
so you built the
vibe with
backpack,
the
and it's not like a live view. It's something that a little more.
No, it is actually just a live view, a Sony camera, and a battery pack for the most part. But yeah, it works pretty good.
It works really well. I've done it with NAB, and we've done our first, like we did that where we toured through NAB probably 10 years ago, and it's super powerful, especially with the tools that you already have. The tools that you're building are what makes that thing work. The live view by itself is not nearly as valuable without some way to get the questions. I literally 10 years ago had somebody in my ear reading the questions to me as we went.
And we have a mounted phone with that host mode showing what's happening.
That's fantastic. Next question.
Jeffrey Powers, Madison, Wisconsin, here on the panels up next. He says, can you share overlays with multiple participants for something like a Zoom call?
Yeah, so when Eli demoed the overlay earlier, he was using OBS, I believe, to drop the overlay on top of his his webcam feed going into Zoom. Inside Hovercast, in a given broadcast, you can have multiple scenes or scene configurations, each with its own output link. So you could easily configure a number of different, if you wanted a different view for each participant with a different lower third, you could do that. You can also pin scenes to appear above everybody's output layer. So if you wanted to have some common elements, a bug, a poll ticker, things like that, that could also work really nicely. And then the other sort of piece of the scene configuration is we kind of give you the option how much you want to manage what the current graphic overlay is, either in Hovercast or in your encoder if you're using a software encoder. We have the concept of what's the active scene right now in Hovercast, so you've got the option to be pulling in the browser link for just that whatever the active scene is considered, or you can grab scenes manually and handle transitions and things like that on your side.
That's great. Yeah, we're doing a lot of experimentation with using a program. I don't know if you're familiar with Zoom ISO, where it can grab all the individual pieces, Zoom ISO and OSC, so that we actually know all the feeds that are coming to us, and then interact with them directly. So it sounds like it wouldn't be that much of a change to tie into what you guys are already doing.
Yeah, we did find last year, obviously, there was a huge explosion in virtual production. We initially started the company really planning on just primarily providing the interactive layer. We didn't really want to get into hiring crews or becoming a real production company. But then, last March, as things sort of exploded and we realized, we can actually have Jack do most of what we need for now from his desk, we did sort of dip our toe in that water. That wound up to us actually now hiring crews out in Dubai. But we did do so much virtual production, so much, and Jack can speak to this more, but playing with the different options between Skype and Microsoft Teams and vMix call before, typically we still wind up really leveraging Zoom. It's just such a common denominator. We were running into all sorts of firewall issues with some of these different options, especially with politicians, and they're extremely limited access in those offices. But Jack's definitely put a lot of work into leveraging Zoom for some of this. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Jack.
Yeah, I wish Zoom ISO had a Windows thing, because I run everything through an AWS server, like Windows image, and yeah, so right now it's most of the Zoom work I do is just actually a capture plus a crop, which is unfortunate, but that's when we want high quality, we'll try and use Skype or vMix call when firewalls aren't an issue.
Right. No, absolutely. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I imagine that last year was pretty hectic for you. As far as did it just suddenly shift from being something that was kind of fun to something that was hair-raisingly busy?
Yeah. Yes. Overnight. Yeah, and I happened to be on parental leave, so Jeff was juggling a lot of balls. But
it was cool though. We had just started with the Bernie campaign actually at the beginning of February, the night before the New Hampshire primary. And they had a brilliant in-house video team over there handling the actual transmission and switching and things like that from the different events and rallies. And so they were just interested in, again, like the donation aspect and the audience moderation and the graphics. So, so we had about a month of, working with that campaign, and really one of its highest moment as well, of traditional campaigning, and that was going really well. But then, of course, the pandemic hits, and I think we were a pretty key part of helping them transition pretty seamlessly to virtual campaigning. And they put on some really amazing virtual rallies, really pulled together really helpful panels, even not in a full electoral sense, but they were bringing together health professionals. They were bringing together people helping with the fact that the economy and employment just created around them. And the sort of conversation that some of these chat tools enabled was really great to see. And the other campaigns sort of definitely took a little bit longer to try to get to a more of a solid ground for the virtual campaigns.
Yes.
If they ever found it.
Next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville, Tennessee is up next. He says, can you select individual chat or comments to view on screen?
Yes, you can. That's one thing we do really, really well. And there's multiple ways that this can work. It all can work with one operator. If you have a small production, you can just sift through it yourself and pick and choose. But then we've done things with huge viewership. This year's E3 was on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and had a ton of concurrent viewers. And we've really optimized to handle that type of chat load. So we have a few different ways of kind of breaking out the work. Like basically, if you have 3 moderators in Hovercast, they can be seeing every third comment and then tagging things with pending. Then there can be a decision maker who says that's approved, who then sends it to the person who's working the graphics, and they can just tap that comment on and put it on screen, which then goes to the talent if you want. So we've really worked out that flow, and it's pretty fun to do. One thing I will add is a new feature that we added is kind of gamification. So we can add points to those comments as well. One of the things we're doing in Dubai is like treasure hunts. So their audience is trying to spot something on screen. First person to type it out gets their comment featured. They get 10 points. Whereas every comment gets 3 points, and all of that, there's different kind of, if you get trivia correct, that has a certain point value. So there's a whole gamification system, which ties into a leaderboard, of course.
That's really cool. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Aaron Husledge is up next from Durham, North Carolina. He says, what data sources can you pull into from, and how often can it update?
I'll throw this to Jeff.
So yeah, we pull from Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook pages. We as well as a couple to event platforms that we've worked with, like Evia. We can pull from ActBlue and Stripe on the donation side to power the sort of thermometer meters and notifications around that. We also have sort of an open webhook endpoint. So if you can point a data feed at us and format it correctly, then we can very easily ingest that data into the system. And finally, we have our own, as I think you saw during the landing page thing, we've got our own sort of white label chat option, as well as a white label sort of Q&A form and photo uploader that pipes into the same system. Most of this works pretty much real time. There's slight differences between the platforms. Technically, the YouTube API tells us how often we're allowed to hit it, which is not every few seconds.
Not that I'm
well, it's I mean, we've been getting some questions about that lately. I mean, it's usually not that bad. We've got a pretty good API threshold with them, thankfully. It took some doing. But it was a very opaque process for sure. I'm not quite sure actually how we got through it. But otherwise, I think like Twitch, for instance, is extremely real time. Our other, our homegrown options are really real time. We leverage, everything's very WebSockety and real time in general with the product, and things are pretty snappy.
Next question.
Georgie Kennedy Jr., Washington, D.C., here on the panel today, and asks, how do you receive the questions to your platform? Mobile app, web browser, something else?
So it's either through those native platforms that I just mentioned, the social networks or video platforms, or through the custom web page. So those landing pages that we showed off work really nicely on mobile. And again, you can either be sort of a chat room based setup there, or you do have the option to just have it be more of a submission form.
Next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville is back with, is there a Stream Deck or companion integration?
Not yet. It's been, I did pick one up with the intent of building one out, but we haven't quite been there, gotten to it yet. But very, very interested in the idea, and I'll consider that an upvote on our roadmap.
There's a lot of Stream Deck users in our group, so that's a pretty common. I think almost everybody in the panel has one that they're using. An average of one per panel is what I would say, because a couple of us have 3 or 4. Next question.
Georgie Kennedy Jr. back again. It says, can you completely white label an event removing powered by Hovercast?
Yes.
Yeah.
Next
and
question.
most of our
Eli.
cross-platform, anytime we're on YouTube and Twitch, etc., totally white labeled.
Right.
Our own websites typically does have powered by Hovercast on the bottom right, but open to the conversation about what it looks like to remove that.
Yep. Next question.
George Kennedy's back from Washington. How is Hovercast brought into vMix?
Hey Jack, how about you? Good.
Sorry, my microphone was muted. Yeah, it's super easy. You just add vMix as a browser source, add Hovercast as a browser source. You can either grab that active link, which is tied to some switchboard icons. You can control Hovercast through hovercast.com, or you can add those scene-specific URLs where you can just layer everything within vMix however you'd like, and it works pretty easily.
That's great. Next question.
Tommy Johnson, St. Paul, Minnesota, up next with, are the edits of others' comments noted as edited, and who edited it?
We don't currently have like an edit trail for that. We do have some finer grained permissions within the tool, so you can restrict who has access to that editor window where they're handling the graphics. Typically, that's only 1 or 2 people. On a show. Then there's a larger number of folks that have access to that audience screen where you can make edits to the chats, but you can still keep that pretty close quarters.
Are people able to edit their own questions?
No. Usually, I mean, when we're bringing in content from social media, it's usually one-off and done.
Within your system, are they able to?
Not currently.
And in your system, do they have voting on the questions?
So not in the Hovercast Pro setup. We're actually we're working on another product called Hovercast Live. That's a little bit more out of the box for for streamers. That is more focused around Q&A and live requests and things like that. That does have some upvote functionality as well as some bounty functionality. You're able to attach payments to some of this stuff. So that's an area we're exploring, and I think some of those concepts will make their way back into Pro.
Yeah. Next question.
Occasional panelist Nick Batt in the UK is up next, and he asks, how do you handle the security aspects of handing over clients' platform logins?
Typically, so clients are able to log in directly themselves via the Hovercast interface. If they're handling the production themselves, they can log in via Facebook, OAuth pop-up and such. if we are handling the production for them, we're typically added to their different social media accounts as whatever the least amount of permission they can give us is, depending on the platform, so that we can handle that. That also, that comes in handy also because, especially, Jack's been up to his ears in dealing with the intricacies of Facebook events and Facebook Live posting recently, which seems to be regressing in some ways. And
it's been regressing.
There's a lot of expertise there. Yeah.
Since Cambridge Analytica, it has been slowly regressing. I admit that we were there early enough that we were scraping before in 2016, and I have to admit it was so wide open that we would just point our system at anything and it would just go, I will pull all the questions in, and that's how we stress tested our system, was to be able to just.
We have a story for that.
Yeah.
Jeff and I made, back when we were music video directors, we made a interactive music video using Facebook Connect, where you connect to it, and it was kind of a first-person video where you are the character, and we had all your information. There was people were texting you if you had listed a significant other. They would text you in the music video, and your location was seen on a map as you went across country. We used it only for good, I swear, but it certainly leveraged everything that Facebook would tell us about you.
Yeah, I've told this one before. We did one where we took Facebook comments and attached them to a flamethrower, and super popular. Just in case you're wondering if Facebook can handle 150,000 interactions a minute, the answer is mostly. So anyway, next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville is back again. He says, how do you bring Hovercast graphics into Mimo Live or OBS?
Not super familiar with Mimo Live, but OBS, it's the same thing. It's just a browser source. You set the scene size to be, by default, we're 1920 by 1080, but you can adjust that to whatever canvas size you'd like, and you just want OBS to match that.
I believe that Mimo will do the same thing with an HTML5. So an HTML5 input on Mimo Live will be the same as OBS, same as vMix, same as it's this input. In fact, we use elemental encoders and Media Live in AWS. And I believe that what I was thinking about with the HTML5 is we should be able to take your page and publish it to the encoder, downstream of everything else, and have all of those things just being embedded.
I know one of the Wowza options allows for that as well, which is really helpful when it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
From Georgie Kennedy Jr. back again. He says, do you have a moderator limit? I'm not sure I understand that. But
I do. Yeah, no, we don't. Totally multiplayer tool. You can have folks from anywhere, and we don't limit how many people can be in the tool at once.
So it'll just automatically load balance against all. It's just n number of it'll just keep on passing the comments to the moderators across it for moderating the questions. Is that?
Yeah, I'll say I'm sure you could probably find a number that breaks it. We haven't gone too crazy with it yet. We've had at least a dozen folks in there, and you've got the ability to toggle between seeing the full feed and seeing the partitioned out version as well, and then quickly hopping between the two, and it will compensate as well. If you hop out, then it'll know not to keep sending you single questions.
Right.
The other thing I would say is inside the editor, you're limited to one person on a widget at a time. Typically it's best if there's really one person moving the graphics around, toggling them on or off. Yeah. And same goes for the decision making at the end of the day with the comments. It's really, we often, with some of these branded projects, there's a lot of people who want to say, but we really try and point our clients to, there should be kind of one person at the end of the line who's going to say this one we're going with, this one we're going with, that one. But you'd be amazed. We've done like the read-only version for lawyers so that they can make sure that the IP doesn't infringe, or who knows.
We worked with Audi right in sort of in the midst of their emissions scandal, and yeah, the lawyers had a multi-page document of the things they didn't want popping in. To that end, we also have the ability to automatically either fully block comments based on terms or sort of balderize comments for lighter issues. But that load in that sensitive list.
I want to step back and say the thing that we are creatively most excited about is truly the real-time communication between audience and show. So I'm trying to we have tools for the lawyers and the moderators and whatever, but ideally it's, you guys as the broadcasters are reactive to the audience, getting them involved in the show, and then creating this awesome feedback loop between the performance and the audience.
As a group that we only do Q&A with the audience, and we've almost done it 600 times now, we completely agree with you. That's all there is to do. Next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville back again with, how is the experience for someone in the audience on a mobile phone or tablet?
Yeah, so the cool thing is if they're using YouTube or Twitch, they're just using it as they would. YouTube has its own mobile app. Twitch has its own mobile app. They have chat, and they're just chatting oftentimes folks don't know they're using Hovercast. They think they're using Twitch, and it just works natively.
Because they're working in Twitch, right? And it's just passing it out.
They're watching in Twitch, yeah. Exactly.
So the real power there is that the widgets that you're compositing back onto it just go into all the different platforms.
Yeah, exactly. It's that was, we really wanted to be cross-platform, and so we found sort of the lowest common denominator, which is baking stuff directly into video. Because sure, Twitch has Twitch extensions, and there's little extra bits and bobs in some of these different platforms. Often we do get the question, so you say you're interactive graphics, does that mean you've got clickable shopping or things like that? And basically, generally the answer is we've got some clickable stuff on if you do our white label sites, but otherwise stuff gets fully baked into the outgoing video feed, and then we listen to chat, which is another sort of part of the common denominator, and really force the interaction through there.
Clickable video is the white whale of the industry. Everyone's searching for it.
Time.
They got a harpoon. They're out there with the boat, and then.
Oh, if we were talking to investors right now, I'd claim that we've got the answer to it. But I think I think everyone here understands that it's.
We had it almost working in 2004 with QuickTime Interactive, and then Apple got rid of all the layers, and then we were like, okay, we're back to zero again. So anyway, next question.
George Kennedy, Washington, D.C. back again. Jack, what's your AWS workflow, and how would Zoom ISO in the cloud be a benefit?
My AWS workflow is I just have a Windows. I'm basically doing all of my cloud production on the cloud using an AWS Windows instance, and I'm running vMix on the cloud there, and I'm going in through Parsec just to interact with it, and then I've got two monitors within. Using Parsec, it allows you to have the second window, and I'm either having Skype or whatever video camera platform I'm using to bring in the video feeds, and I'm just operating it all from there, plus Hovercast on a second monitor on my local computer. So it all operates. I'm operating Hovercast locally and then doing all the video production in the cloud. That way I have no issue with internet upload or download speeds.
And Zoom ISO would be helpful in order to sort of break out those inputs more discreetly rather than the current screen capture method that we're stuck with, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we're not using it today. We've been testing it over the last 2 weeks, but we pulled 20 feeds out of Zoom into hardware. So we actually, we've got 5 Mac Minis that each push 4 feeds out each into a constellation, and normally we're streaming this to YouTube in parallel. That is an HDR, and because we're promoting the whole thing to HDR as we go through it at 4K. So which doesn't look good when you're doing Zoom, but it does when you do multi-sources. Everything's at full resolution. So anyway, so that's the. But we have a lot of folks here that do cloud AWS pipelines. So it's and so you're controlling Hovercast at. You're controlling Hovercast locally, but the composite of the widgets is happening in vMix in the cloud. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, great. Next question.
George is back. George Kennedy with Eli. How easy is it to rearrange widgets on screen?
Incredibly easy. You can toggle them around. You can move them in real time. You can
Yeah, are you able to move them in kind of a sandbox environment, and then hit it and have it just move them like nicely?
Exactly. There's like a draft mode where you can preview what's going to happen, and then you toggle it on and it goes.
Are you able to save states so that you can go like for this part of the show where the widgets are going to be here, and for this part of the show the widgets are going to be there?
Our way of doing that is scenes. You can create different scenes with different scene layouts, and then toggle between the different scenes. So we have, our typical scenes that most folks want is pre-show countdown, main show, be right back screen, and end screen. But if you wanted, you can have as many scenes as you want, and it's easy to toggle between them. And also, you can have the same. Oh, go on, John.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say also the widgets have animations built into them. So like when you're playing user comments, if you click on user comment, it'll animate on, then animate off. So it'll do a fade or a grow or whatever kind of animation you want there, along with lower thirds and polls. As soon as you're changing the content that's in them, you can set it so it animates on and off. So there's some interaction there.
That's fantastic. Unless anyone has any other questions, I think we're near the end of our great set of questions here, and it's really exciting to see what you guys are doing. So, really, I was talking to Jordan yesterday. I was like, I've heard about Hovercast and I saw it there, but I was like, I'm not going to bother researching because I know that everyone will have better questions than I do if we just come here and answer it all. And so, it really sounds like you guys are pushing the outer envelope of interactivity, and I think that we're obviously. We're a soft crowd for it. We believe heavily in it, and I think that interactive video is the future. I mean, I think that we're all, kind of barreling towards that, of being able to interact with the audience. I mean, I think that what we have found here is that over the last, almost 600 days straight, we have found here that this is much more compelling than watching, most of the passive, what I would call legacy content that we see on air. You were gonna say something, Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and questions. Yeah, totally, we're aligned. I mean, it's such a win-win when you involve the audience. Engagement goes way up. Your clients love it. The audience loves it. Now with some of this gamification stuff, the audience has a real stake in what they're doing and are kind of part of the show. And our dream truly is kind of ultimately is co-creation. And so like, what is a live show that's created by the audience, that you have this sort of second writer's room at your disposal who are contributing positively to the project and crafting something in real time together.
And we definitely agree. So thank you so much. Definitely check out Hovercast, and I'm sure that people can get a hold of you through the webpage. So
well, anybody who wants access to a quick for a demo account, please just reach out through hovercast.com, and we'd be happy to hook anybody here up with a demo account to play.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much to our producers for the great questions. All the really, really great way to drive the conversation there. So you did a great job on the first hour and second hour. And of course, thank you to the panelists who have contribute so much back to the rest of the community. All right. Thank you. And now the other 21 hours is about to start. Remember that we have education tomorrow. So education discussion, that's not streamed. We have cooking with Davinci Gajar at 11. You can ask, by the way, you can ask questions during that as well. We use Makana for that. So you can ask the questions during that time, and we're answering them in real time as we're cooking as best we can. We're going to put somebody in the question box here sometime soon. And then, of course, you can watch behind the scenes for the Belfast Method with Todd Reynolds at noon. And the separate link goes out in the email that we sent out earlier.